I oftentimes see Christian apologists use irreducible complexity as being this, uh, this silver bullet type of argument that demonstrates not only that a system must be designed, but there's no way evolutionary mechanisms can produce the system. And to me, part of the issue is the way the argument oftentimes is framed. So the idea, as you're mentioning, behind irreducible complexity is that it's referring to a system that is composed of a particular number of parts where all the parts have to be present and they have to interact in a precise way for that system to have minimal function. And if any one of those parts is missing or they're not interacting in a just so manner, again, the system loses function. And so the argument that Behe advanced is that those kind of systems have to come together all at once, and they have to come together all at once perfectly, because there's no way that a partial system could ever be selected by natural selection, because there's nothing for natural selection to operate on. And so a lot of times the way the argument is framed is that that system is irreducibly complex, therefore evolution can't produce it, therefore it must be designed. And to me, where that's a flawed argument is that all you have to do is come up with a plausible explanation for how an irreducibly complex system could emerge, and the whole argument unravels.
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to that. One, obviously, if you can show that these things came together in stages, right, in different types of iterations, then that kind of puts a damper on the whole complexity argument. But the other thing is that you'd have to show that the original iterations didn't have some kind of other function. I mean, even a mousetrap that doesn't work as a mousetrap could still function as something else, like a doorstop. It all depends on what the system is going to do functional wise. And this is one of the things where people have argued, well, what good is 1/3 of a wing, right? Well, but at some point, it wasn't a wing as we understand a wing to be. Now, it has very similar characteristics, but it doesn't function as a wing to fly. It functioned maybe perhaps as a thermal regulator or something like that, right? So there are other things that it could have been, and then got repurposed. Like we are somehow, we are repurposed reptilians in some ways with the different jawbones in the inner ear, things of that nature that didn't have a purpose that it has now, but it had a different purpose way back when. And so nature takes these things and kind of just says, okay, this works for this, but maybe it work a little better for this. So, and by the way, I don't think it has intentional states. I don't think that there's an intentionality there. But if things do work better for fitness, confer fitness as with respect to the selective pressure, then nature's going to select it for it more. So I don't think Behe's argument really works, because one, he actually does say that these things have to become like instantaneous, right? He basically argues that you have to have the system functioning at once, all at once, and not in stages, because any component that's missing, that system doesn't have functionality for what it is functioning supposedly for. So I don't see how in biology we just posit, hey, this system just came out of nowhere, right? I mean, that would, to me, seem to violate evolutionary processes.
Yeah, well, and this is partly why Behe, is arguing that they must be designed, because they would have to all of a sudden come together. But in a sense, the argument is overlooking a really central mechanism that evolutionary biologists have proposed, which is the idea of co-option, where evolution is using pre-existing systems, co-opting them, modifying them, cobbling them together into new systems that have, again, completely different function than the starting systems. And so this is a standard mechanism in evolution. So that argument really is ignoring or overlooking, again, an idea that's central to the evolutionary, the evolutionary framework. Now, I actually don't think the idea of irreducible complexity is completely hopeless, though, as a way to make the case for design. And I know, Steve, you and I differ on the idea of is design in nature bona fide design, or is it apparent design? But to me, the way I would use the argument, and it's not nearly as potent or as impactful, would be that as human beings, when we design systems, many times the systems that we design are irreducibly complex. And so if we see a system that's irreducibly complex, it's rational to think that design may be the explanation for that system. It doesn't mean that there's not other possible explanations, but it does serve as an indication or a marker for design, just like fine tuning or optimization are characteristics of designs that we would make as human beings. Likewise, evolutionary mechanisms can explain fine tuning and optimization as well. But there's, in other words, that when you do see those properties, it at least pushes you into the arena where you could argue that those properties are consistent with systems that are designed, though it doesn't prove that they're designed, right? It makes it rational to think that they're designed.
Yeah, but those systems are designed all at once. I mean, when an architect or an engineer designs a system, right, they say, this is what I want the system to do. This is what I need to put into the system to make it happen. And they generally try to avoid having superfluous and not important stuff that goes into that system, right? They don't put a bunch of stuff in that has nothing to do with the functionality of the system, because that would be wasteful. I think the argument that a lot of these people have against intelligent design, and we kind of touched on this recently, on bad design, is that there seems to be a lot of superfluous stuff that goes into biological systems that maybe when it talks about the functionality, it could exist, differently, could exist without some specific things existing. Like, for example, even ATP synthase, sure. If you remove one component, it doesn't work for producing ATP synthase. It doesn't necessarily mean it has no functionality whatsoever. It could have actually had functionality for something else. But what that is, I don't think anybody really has to show that what the function needs to be. They just need to show that the function it was designed for, one, had to come about all at once, and two, couldn't be explained by any other mechanisms. And I think that's where I think the intelligent design aspect for complexity fails.
Yeah. Well, you get into this idea of the underdetermination theory that's part of science, where the idea is that a scientific theory is always underdetermined by the data, which as a consequence of that means you could actually have two very different explanations for the same phenomena, and that the data is consistent. And so I would say that essentially applies to the idea of irreducible complexity, optimization, and fine-tuning, is that those are properties that you could explain through design, or you could explain through evolutionary mechanism. And so what you need to do is look for another set of criteria to determine whether it's bona fide design or again, apparent design.
Do you think
right?
do you think that that when you talk about the underdeterminacy, and I think you're absolutely right on that. If I remember correctly, I don't know if it was Myers or Behe or one of them, they had something called specified complexity. Do you remember something like that?
Yeah.
Do you think
that's a Dembski's idea.
It was Dembski. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so was the specified complexity trying to somehow I'm trying to think of the term, was basically a way to say, hey, look, we know we have underdeterminacy here where multiple things could explain this, but because it's specified complex information, it can only be from some kind of intelligent agent.
Yeah, well, I actually like the idea of specified complexity because the way I understand Dembski is that it's not enough to say that a system is complex, but if you say that system is complex and it seems to have a particular pattern that looks as if it was specified independent of that system, that then becomes a marker for design.
It favors one over the other.
Right. So it would be similar to, I think, what an archaeologist is doing when they say that this looks like it's designed, because there's a certain set of patterns that it has that look like those patterns were imposed outside of the system itself by an intelligent agent. So that's what I think Dembski is getting at. I think that's actually a better criteria for design than irreducible complexity. But notice that so I think it's just a better, more thoughtful criteria for design. I'm not sure that it's not without its problems, but I think it's a better conception of design.
Yeah, I think Dembski was just trying to utilize the concept of specified complexity to say, hey, given these two or more competing possible explanations, He's saying that it's going to probably favor one more than the other, but I still think there's an undeterminacy there regardless. I don't think you can ever get away from that from the data sets.
Yeah, and that probably very much is true. But to me, at the end of the day, the issue that I have really with irreducible complexity is the way the argument is framed. It's really a negative argument for design, where you're saying that if evolution can't explain this system, therefore it must be designed. And that really is a discussion more about what evolution can or can't do. But I'd rather, if you're going to make a design argument, say, I believe that the system is designed because it has certain attributes that reflect what I would expect, or what people would agree upon is characteristic of design. So that's a positive argument where you're saying, I believe the system is designed because it has these attributes that indicate design, versus I think it's designed because evolution can't explain it. I think that's not a great argument to make.